The morning the war began, I woke up gagging on the smell of something sour, heavy, and rotting. My boots squelched into mud that hadn't been there the night before. But the mud wasn't the worst part, not by a long shot. It was the pile of trash, heaving with flies, spilling across my ranch's main access trail. Like some grotesque offering to a landfill god. Furniture, garbage bags bloated with food scraps. A broken toilet, of all things. And worst of all, oil stained. Cardboard boxes soaking into the edge of the creek that ran along the east side of my property. It was 6:42 a.m. The sun had barely lifted above the hills. Birds had stopped singing. Even they didn't want to be near this. I stood there for a full minute, staring, not moving. Just breathing through my mouth and trying to process what I was seeing. This land wasn't just my property, was the last gift my father left me. He'd passed away 2 years ago, and I'd done everything I could to preserve what he'd built. This wasn't some trophy ranch. It was lived in, earned, maintained, sacred. So to see it defiled, violated with rotting junk and plastic tangled in my cattails. My hands shook. At first, I thought it had to be an accident. Maybe a hauling truck overturned. Maybe someone dumped their load here by mistake. That hope lasted all of 15 seconds. A golf cart buzzed into view, making its way up the private access road like it belonged there. A woman drove it mid-50s, rigid posture, enormous sunglasses, and a cell phone glued to her ear. She wore a pastel cardigan over a white-collared blouse, the kind of ensemble you'd expect at a country club brunch, not in the middle of cow country. I didn't know her name yet, but I knew her type. Every neighborhood has one. The self-appointed queen of petty laws and tighter fences. She didn't notice me at first. She pulled up next to the garbage, tapped a few photos on her phone, then grinned like she'd just staged an art exhibit. "Excuse me?" I called out, keeping my voice even. "You wouldn't happen to know how all this got here, would you?" She flinched, startled, then turned to me with a practiced smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Oh, you must be the ... new landowner," she said, as if the word tasted sour. "I'm Karen, president of the Meadowbrook Heights Homeowners Association. We've been meaning to introduce ourselves." I blinked. Meadowbrook Heights was a suburban development a few plots down the road. Neatly trimmed hedges, vinyl fences, and rows of nearly identical houses stacked like plastic models. My land didn't intersect with theirs, not even remotely. "This is private ranch land," I said slowly. "My family's owned this land since the 60s. I'm not part of your HOA. Karen's smile didn't falter. If anything, it grew more patronizing. "Well, technically, there's been some confusion about the easement lines. And we've had some issues with community waste removal. So our board voted to use this little spot as a temporary staging area. It's just runoff from our spring cleanup." I stared at her. Then at the runoff, which included a rusted-out lawnmower and something I was pretty sure used to be a mattress. "This is not a staging area. It's a federally monitored creek bed. You're dumping directly into an EPA-protected zone." Karen scoffed. "Oh, please. That little trickle of water. Honey, I've lived here for 10 years. Nobody cares about this land but you." That's when it hit me. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. And worse, she thought she was untouchable. I stepped forward, careful not to lose my temper. "I need you to get your people to remove this today. You're trespassing, and you're violating multiple laws." She didn't even flinch. Instead, she leaned on the steering wheel and chuckled. "Listen, I get it. You're new to the area, probably don't understand how things work around here. But let me give you a little tip. Working with the HOA will make your life easier. Resisting? US, not so much." My pulse pounded in my ears. I wasn't some hothead. But this woman had the smugness of someone who'd bullied her way through 1,000 bake sales and town halls without ever being told no. I looked her dead in the eyes. I don't answer to the HOA. This is my land. And if you don't get this garbage off it by tonight, I'll be calling more than just the county. She gave me a tight smile, started her golf cart, and said over her shoulder, "You do what you have to, ranch boy. But don't say I didn't." Try to be friendly. And just like that, she buzzed away, leaving a trail of dust and the faint scent of lilac perfume behind her. I stood there for a long time after she left, watching as the wind picked up and stirred the garbage, sending a McDonald's wrapper tumbling down toward the creek. So that was Karen, not just entitled, strategic. She knew where the lines were, and she was betting I didn't have the time, the money, or the energy to push back. I snapped a few photos, not just for evidence, for me. To remember how I felt in that moment, furious, disrespected, and powerless. But only for now. Karen had no idea what she'd just stepped into. This wasn't her cul-de-sac. This was my land. And the federal government knew it too. The wind shifted again, and the stench of the garbage clawed its way up my nostrils. I turned and headed back toward the house. I had a call to make hand, a plan to build, because if she thought this was over, she was dead wrong. By the following morning, the trash had tripled. I wasn't even shocked this time, just hollow. A shopping cart lay half submerged in the creek like some kind of rusted corpse. Old tires, a kitchen sink, broken ceramic tiles littered the grass like jagged teeth. My dog, Ranger, wouldn't go near the spot anymore. He just sat by the fence and growled every time a Meadowbrook SUV rolled by. I knew how he felt. Karen had taken my refusal as a challenge. Not only was the trash bigger, it was deliberate, organized, even. Someone had stacked broken chairs along the edge like barricades. I found a tarp-labeled property of Meadowbrook, HOA, stuffed under a mound of tree limbs. Like a signature, I tried, at first, to go the peaceful route. I contacted the county. They passed me around like a hot potato. Public Works to zoning, to environmental services, to legal. No one wanted to get involved. HOA disputes were notoriously messy. And as Karen no doubt knew, most people couldn't afford the time or money to fight them. But I wasn't most people. Still, when I reached out to my lawyer, he hesitated. Easement claims are a nightmare, he warned. If she can convince anyone that a portion of that creek lies in a gray zone, especially if she floods the county with her HOA paperwork, she'll spend years fighting it. I asked him if federal water protection laws might trump HOA maps. He paused. Maybe. If that creek's officially under EPA jurisdiction, she's playing with fire. But you'd need proof. And even then, you'd need them to care. That was the catch. No one cared yet. Meanwhile, Karen escalated. The next week, she showed up with 3 other HOA members, all dressed in identical navy windbreakers with the Meadowbrook logo. They rode in on 2 golf carts like some overconfident parade, parked by the garbage pile, and started unloading more debris, wood scraps, cardboard, even chunks of brick. I confronted them immediately. "I've already warned you," I said, voice sharp but controlled. "This is illegal dumping. You're trespassing." Karen didn't even look up from her clipboard. "We're organizing a community beautification project. You should be thanking us, beautification. You're destroying a protected waterway." She clicked her tongue. "If it's so protected, why is it so overgrown? We're clearing dead zones, making space for new plantings. You ought to learn a thing or two about modern landscaping." I couldn't help it. I laughed, a bitter, stunned laugh. "You're not landscaping, you're polluting." Karen's second in command, a man named Doug with a comb-over and mirrored sunglasses, smirked. "Relax, cowboy. It's just trash. Nature breaks down all this stuff eventually. Tell that to the EPA." Karen froze for a half-second. Not long, just enough for me to notice. But then she smiled sweetly again and waved a hand like she was dismissing a child's tantrum. "Will be gone soon. You can call whoever you want." And they were gone 10 minutes later, having left more behind than they took. That night, I sat on my porch with Ranger and scrolled through my phone's gallery. Dozens of pictures, videos, GPS timestamps, drone footage of the creek winding through my property. But the problem was clear. Evidence didn't matter without pressure. Karen was banking on obscurity. That no one would raise hell over a hidden creek on a private ranch. She was gambling that I'd get tired, give up, or run out of options, but she made a mistake. 3 nights later, it rained. Hard enough to make the creek swell and push debris downstream. I walked the bank with a flashlight and watched as motor oil leaked from a broken container, creating slick, rainbow-colored swirls across the surface. And that's when I remembered. Years ago, my father signed a conservation agreement with the EPA. The creek wasn't just protected, was registered, monitored, surveyed quarterly. Part of a watershed that eventually fed into a major municipal water system. And Karen had just dumped chemical waste into it. Suddenly, everything snapped into place. The photos, the maps, the footage wasn't just for the county anymore. It was for the feds. I spent the next day assembling everything. Every photo labeled and timestamped. Drone footage clipped and highlighted. I dug out the conservation paperwork my father had stored in his old desk drawer, still sealed in a manila envelope. It had an EPA project number, coordinates, a full list of environmental specifications, including water purity benchmarks and protected species nesting reports. I built a digital dossier, titled it Illegal Dumping Incident, Meadowbrook HOA, and sent it to 3 places: the regional EPA office, a local environmental protection group that did advocacy work, and the editor of the town's small newspaper. Then I waited 2 days later. I got the call. The EPA rep didn't sound amused. He sounded furious. "We take reports like this seriously, especially when there's contamination this close to a federal water system." I gave him permission to enter the property and told him the dumping was ongoing. He thanked me, and I could hear the shuffle of paperwork on the other end. "We'll be sending a field team out immediately." I hung up and leaned back in my chair. Ranger thumped his tail against the porch boards like he knew something good was coming. But I didn't relax, not yet, because Karen still had no idea what was coming. She was still riding high, smug and unbothered, thinking her HOA army had. The next morning, she was back, this time with more people. A neighborhood cleanup event, she called it. Colorful flags, folding tables with lemonade, HOA members snapping selfies as they tossed more trash into what had now become a full-blown illegal dump site. Karen even held a little speech, microphone and all. Meadowbrook believes in stewardship, she declared to scattered applause. And while some may resist change, true community spirit is about collaboration, even if some folks prefer to. Live in the past, she looked directly at me when she said it. I was standing by the fence, arms folded, camera phone filming. She blew me a kiss. I smiled, because behind her, just cresting the tree line, were 3 white trucks with green EPA decals kicking up dust as they rumbled onto my land, and Karen didn't see them coming. Not yet, but she would. The moment Karen noticed the EPA trucks, her smile vanished like fog in sunlight. She had been mid-sentence, lecturing one of her HOA members about properly sorting recyclables, when she caught sight of the convoy rolling down the gravel path that cut through my pasture. The first truck braked hard, kicking up a plume of dust as 2 agents in dark green uniforms stepped out. Clipboards in hand, sunglasses on, badges flashing. Karen's eyes darted from the trucks to me, then back. Again, her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. I didn't move. I just leaned against my fence post and tipped my hat one of the agents. A tall woman with a sharp jawline and a voice like polished steel walked up to her. "Are you the individual responsible for this site?" Karen blinked. "Excuse me?" "Received reports of illegal dumping on federally protected wetlands. This area is part of a designated watershed under EPA monitoring. We have reason to believe this material," she gestured toward the heaping piles of garbage, "originated from this HOA. Karen laughed nervously. No, that's a misunderstanding. This is all part of a community beautification initiative. We were cleaning up abandoned land." The second agent, a short man with a camera slung over his shoulder, began filming. "We have aerial drone footage," he said, glancing toward me briefly, "and photo documentation showing dumping activity occurring over the last 10 days. Isn't even part of the HOA jurisdiction," Karen snapped, pointing back toward the paved street beyond the fence line. "That man owns this land. He's been difficult. He won't cooperate." "I've been trespassed," I replied calmly. Repeatedly, despite multiple warnings. The tall agent didn't even look at me. Her attention stayed fixed on Karen. "Ma'am, you aware that dumping non-biodegradable waste into a federally protected creek carries both civil and criminal penalties?" Karen's face paled. I thought this was just some drainage ditch. I didn't know it was federal land." The agent held up a laminated map and pointed to the shaded zone labeled EPA Wetland Buffer. Level 3. It ran like a ribbon through my property and was clearly marked with boundaries. "Then you failed to do your due diligence. And that negligence has already caused environmental impact. We've detected oil contaminants downstream. This will require an immediate mitigation report and likely a site cleanup order." Karen stumbled backward, her HOA members starting to drift behind her, suddenly interested in their phones or shoes. Doug, the man with the comb-over, tried to smooth things over. Hey, let's all calm down. No one's trying to break laws here. This was just a misunderstanding." The camera agent snapped a photo of him mid-sentence. "Intent doesn't eliminate liability. The damage is done." The agents began walking the perimeter, snapping pictures, taking samples, muttering about water purity levels and environmental thresholds. One of them pulled out a tape measure and began assessing the distance between the waste pile and the creek. Another tested soil with a long steel probe. Karen stood frozen, arms wrapped around herself like the wind had suddenly turned cold. I approached slowly, my boots crunching over the gravel. "You should have left it alone," I said quietly. Karen turned to me, eyes wide with something between rage and disbelief. "You did this." I smiled. "No, Karen. You did this. I just documented it." The irony of it all was almost poetic. For weeks, she had walked across my land like she owned it, flinging rules and fake maps like she was queen of some HOA empire. Now, the real authority had arrived, and she was shrinking under it. Later that day, the EPA issued a cease and desist order. The dump site was now officially a hazard. No one was allowed near it until a full environmental inspection was completed. They flagged the area with bright orange tape and placed signs every 20 feet. Federal oversight, no trespassing. Karen tried to argue with the agents as they left, practically chasing them to their trucks, but they didn't even turn around. One of them handed her a packet of paperwork that made her knees wobble. Fines, required cleanup costs, legal liabilities, estimated damages. She looked like she might faint by evening. The HOA's group chat, normally buzzing with flower photos and pool schedules, was on fire. Screenshots poured in. Someone had filmed the whole EPA visit and posted it to the town's Facebook group. The title? HOA President Gets Schooled by the Feds. It racked up 5,000 views by midnight. By morning, it was trending locally, complete with memes. One showed Karen in her golf cart with the caption, "Wheels of Injustice." Another had her pointing angrily at the agents with the tagline, "Karen versus the EPA nature always wins." I didn't post any of it, but I sure as hell saved the screenshots. That weekend, the HOA held an emergency meeting without Karen, according to a friendly neighbor who'd grown tired of her antics. The board had voted to suspend her indefinitely. Her name was removed from the community website. The vice president issued a formal apology letter to me via email and offered to send volunteers to help with trash removal, pending EPA approval. I declined, politely, because the damage wasn't just physical. Karen hadn't just dumped garbage. On my land, she'd dumped contempt, entitlement, the belief that her fake authority trumped everyone else's boundaries. Now she was facing real boundaries. The EPA returned 2 days later with full hazmat gear and industrial cleanup equipment. A team of contractors descended on the site, removing debris with clawed machines and vacuum pumps, digging into the contaminated earth like surgeons. Karen was ordered to personally oversee the HOA's share of costs. According to public records, the estimated environmental fines ranged from $85,000 to upwards of $250,000. Depending on how deep the contamination went, as far as I was concerned. They couldn't dig deep enough. For the first time in weeks, I sat on my porch without the smell of trash wafting through the air. The breeze carried only the scent of wild sage and clean dirt. Ranger stretched at my feet, belly up, paws twitching as he dreamed. Peace had returned, but not by accident, not by luck, by strategy, patience, persistence. Karen had underestimated me. She thought because I was quiet, I was weak. Because I didn't yell or argue or threaten, I wouldn't fight. But I'd learned from my father, some battles you win not with fists, but with paperwork, footage, and just enough rope for them to hang themselves. And Karen? She tied the knot all on her own. A week later, the scene on my land had transformed. The trash was gone, every last shred of it. The ground had been aerated, tested, and cleaned under the supervision of hazmat crews in yellow suits. My creek ran clear again, its banks lined with fresh hay and biodegradable netting to prevent erosion. But the real cleanup had only just begun, and it wasn't on my land. It was in Karen's world. The fallout from the EPA investigation spread through Meadowbrook like a wildfire in dry grass. Residents who once hailed Karen as a community leader now whispered her name like it was a curse. The HOA's legal counsel resigned. Several board members stepped down, citing irreconcilable leadership issues. The remaining few issued a public statement distancing themselves from Karen's decisions and blamed her for unilateral actions taken without full board approval. It was a fancy way of saying she'd gone rogue, and they didn't want to burn with her. But the part that truly cemented her downfall came on a Thursday morning, when Karen herself was served with a formal notice on her front porch in full view of her neighbors. The EPA had filed civil charges against her and the HOA jointly for environmental violations, illegal dumping, and failure to comply with federal conservation laws. The fine, $186,000, pending further inspection and cleanup reimbursements. Her response? She tried to spin it. In the HOA newsletter, she penned a rambling clarification, blaming misinformation, accusing me of deliberately misleading federal agencies and implying that her intentions had always been noble. She even threw in a few lines about community unity and how vindictive landowners threatened the spirit of suburban peace. No one bought it. Screenshots of her letter made the rounds online, followed by public records revealing that she had previously ignored environmental compliance notices at other properties she managed. Turns out this wasn't her first rodeo, it was just the first time. She'd been caught so publicly, and then came the cherry on top: 3 EPA officials returned to my ranch, this time accompanied by a representative from the local newspaper, who wanted a follow-up story on the enforcement. I walked them down to the creek, now fully restored, and showed them the laminated EPA signs my dad had installed years ago. The journalist asked a few questions, snapped some photos, and published a piece titled "Rancher vs. HOA: How One Landowner Held the Line." It was front page. Karen was mentioned by name. A few days later, I received a certified letter in the mail. Karen was suing me for defamation, claiming emotional distress and reputational damage. I couldn't stop laughing. She actually believed she could bury me in paperwork the same way she buried my creek in garbage. My lawyer took one look and grinned. This is going to be fun. We filed a countersuit: trespassing, illegal dumping, property damage, and harassment. The moment we submitted the video footage from my trail cameras, including the clip where Karen proudly declared, "Nobody cares about this land but you," her case crumbled faster than a dry leaf under a boot. The court ordered her to withdraw the defamation suit, pay my legal fees, and issue a written apology within 30 days. That apology, cold and begrudging, arrived via email. It was a single paragraph riddled with typos, clearly written under duress. Still, I printed it, framed it, and hung it in the shed just for the symbolism. Meanwhile, this community she once ruled began rebuilding itself without her. The new HOA president, a quiet older woman named Alice, reached out to me directly. She wanted to make peace. Asked if they could fund the planting of native trees along the boundary line as a gesture of goodwill. I agreed, begrudgingly at first. But Alice wasn't Karen. She was humble, thoughtful, and didn't come armed with fake maps or clipboard threats. When the new saplings arrived, several Meadowbrook volunteers came with shovels, gloves, and coffee. No one brought golf carts. That felt like progress. As for Karen, she faded into the background like an old ghost. Her front yard grew wild. Her once bustling driveway sat empty for weeks. Rumor had it she was trying to sell her house, but no offers had come in. Online, her name was forever tied to memes and Facebook posts, captioned with her infamous, quote, "Nature always cleans itself." That one made it onto a reusable tote bag in a local gift shop. I bought one. One cool evening, I sat on the porch. Ranger curled up at my feet, sipping coffee and watching the wind ripple across the field. A shiny white sedan rolled up to the end of the drive. It paused. I tensed. Then the door opened, and a man stepped out mid-30s. Khakis, dress shoes, clipboard in hand. "Good afternoon," he called politely. "EPA follow-up inspection. Just need to verify runoff containment and document compliance." I waved him in. "You're in the right place." As he walked the creek's edge, checking the barriers and snapping a few shots, he turned to me with a raised brow. "Heard about what happened here? It's kind of legendary in the regional office." I chuckled. "It was a mess. But I've got good neighbors now. That helps." He nodded. "And a stubborn streak, from what I've heard. Let's call it strategic patience." He laughed, scribbled something, and left me with a firm handshake and a clean bill of environmental health. As the sun dipped behind the hills, I looked over my land, clean, quiet, and mine. Fully mine in every sense. No more golf carts. No more smug entitlement. Just the breeze, the grass, and the slow return of birdsong. And on the edge of the creek, staked into the soil, was a hand-painted sign I'd put up that morning. It read, "Protected. Land, no dumping. No exceptions." Below that, in smaller print, "Nature always cleans itself, Karen, 2025. Justice, it turned out, wasn't just legal or financial. It was poetic, and it looked a lot like a peaceful ranch at dusk.